you'll be focusing on the other people, the other person, the other things, the situation as the reason that you're miserable, but really it's not them, right? It's you, right? So each of us are responsible for the space between our ears. However we feel is determined by what we perceive. Hi, everybody. This is your friendly neighborhood psychologist, Dr. Laird Bridgman, coming to you again for Psychology for Every Day. And today we're going to talk about maybe one of the most important socially relevant topics that I think I could cover right now at this point in time, here on September 16th in 2025. With everything that's going on in the world, the entire world, literally, so many countries are experiencing a variety of social unrest, wars, conflicts of all kinds. And so I thought the topic of the psychology of really strong negative mood states like anger and hatred might be of interest to everybody. So let's take a minute and dive in to the CBT view of anger and hatred, for example. We're going to talk about this through the lens of my mentor, trainer Dr. Beck, who did a fabulous treatise on the concept, looking at social logic as well as psychological aspects of anger and hatred in a historical textbook called Prisoners of Hate. I'll put the reference for you in text here or there or somewhere, so it'll show up. But I want to give him credit for this concept. It's not mine. I didn't make it up. So, and it was written long ago. But I don't hear a lot about it. I don't hear people talking about it much. There's many ways that you could conceptualize, what it is that makes people do whatever it is they do when they're very upset and angry. But this is one way to think about it, okay? The textbook is out of print at this point, unfortunately. But I have seen used copies available on the old airweb. So if you're really interested in a book that will make your brain hurt, it's a brilliant work by a brilliant man. And that's Dr. Aaron T. Beck, A.T. Beck, B-E-C-K. Okay, off we go. So the concept that he put together is his hostility algorithm, which is a bit of a Venn diagram, if you will. And it begins with an event that causes the upsetness within an individual, right? And the upsetness is almost always some type of hurt, loss, or threat of hurt or loss. And at the first level of kind of analyzing how it progresses, if the event is considered excusable or justified, then you don't, go further down the rabbit hole of anger and hatred. Okay, you excuse it, you deal with whatever pain or hurt you have, and you heal up and you move on, right? However, if you also deem it intentional, then it's not justified. And if it causes particularly significant distress, then it's not considered excusable either. And so then that makes it something which violates a rule of some sort. You shouldn't do this or that or the other. And individuals have particular rules, and then society structures or cultural structures have specific rules. So whichever rule applies, that's leading to the emotional distress is the rule that would be on the books, as it were. And understanding what that rule is for any individual or group of people is an important piece of the puzzle, and understanding, or as we say in the field, conceptualizing the anger and hatred that a person has. So once you've determined that the person violated a rule, then there's a review of the record. And so if there are previous violations of the rule, then all of those violations are recited. Individually, this mostly happens inside somebody's head, but when they're talking to somebody else, or there's a group of people, then there'll be the remembering out loud, right? So, well, this person always, or think about the last time they did this or they did that, right? So there's this recitation of the evidence that has accumulated against you. After that point, right, and people can sit and spin in that for a long time. They can get more and more and more upset by thinking about how many times this person violated whatever rule is. And that's important to understand because it can cause a bit of what we call pasteurization, right? It's spending too much time in the past. And so it may or may not be true or accurate or helpful to attach past violations to the current circumstances. It might be, but it might also not be. So it all depends. But once that's been completed, then you move into the next section, which is called blameworthy, right? So that means that there has been a judgment, right? So somebody has served as judge and jury and prosecutor. And all this evidence has been presented. The jury votes and determines that, yes, this person is guilty of said offense. And then they are deserving of punishment, okay? And then once that judgment happens, then that leads to the strong emotions, so hostility and anger or even hatred. And then that in turn leads to this desire to punish, right? So punishment is an interesting concept in and of itself. It's like the idea isn't justice, right? That's not what justice is. We can see a really much better example of justice within justice systems like the U.S. and a lot of other countries that have modern, reasonable systems of evaluating guilt and innocence and meting out reasonable sentences for whatever crimes are committed. Now, interpersonally, this becomes a problem at a certain point in time, right? That it's one thing to say that somebody, was, a bad person of whatever, like use whatever label you want. I don't want to get any strikes against my channel for using particular words. But just you can imagine what kind of labels people use about other people, right? And so the more you label somebody, right, then the more you are reducing that person to that one characteristic, right? So if you say somebody is, let's say broadly, because I'm going to get a strike for this, self-centered, okay? So if somebody is self-centered, right, in a given moment, what does that mean? Versus what does it mean about them as a person, okay? So if you're self-centered in a moment, does that mean you're self-centered always? No, obviously, right? And then more importantly, let's say that a person is self-centered more times than not. What does that mean? Does that mean they're a bad person? Does that mean that they are, not deserving of respect or even just basic respect as a human being, right? That's where what happens is we start to dehumanize people. And then we rationalize the idea that we can punish them, that we are arbiters of justice and that we can dish out that justice. And so then interpersonally, that means that you yell at somebody mostly, right? You call them names, right? Or you say whatever mean things that you're going to say to them because you're the judge, the jury, and now the executioner. Well, it's just a very small step forward from verbal justice being meted out to attacking somebody physically. To whatever degree of severity, you swat somebody on the arm, or you slap them across the face or you punch them in the nose or worse, right? It's still the same process psychologically. So the more that you kind of indulge and entertain these are very strong negative emotions, then the more negative emotions and the more circumstances that you see that are negative. It's called a negativity bias. Look it up. I didn't make that up either. And what that does is it creates this self-sustaining system. And if you sit in it long enough, really, you become really miserable. And you'll be focusing on the other people, the other person, the other things, the situation as the reason that you're miserable. But really, it's not them, right? It's you, right? So each of us are responsible for the space between our ears, right? And, however we feel is determined by what we perceive. Like it's the meaning we assign to things that brings us these strong emotions. So let's say that somebody says, Dr. Bridgman, you're an idiot. You don't really know anything or understand anything about anger and hatred. Well, okay, so simply because they say it doesn't make it so. Let's say it was true and that I was completely wrong in understanding Dr. Beck's theory. What does that mean about me? Well, you could say whatever you want. It really is up to me to determine for myself what it means about me, not you. Okay? So I can allow that I could be wrong, and, I would acknowledge that I'm wrong, and I'd feel bad that I made the mistake, and I would apologize for having made the mistake. But I'm only human. None of us are perfect, are we? Anybody that's perfect can pick up a couple stones and hurl them at me, because I'd love to meet you perfect people. So, what I really kind of want to communicate to everybody is, let's slow down and take a breath, right? If we get swept up in these strong emotions, then our strong emotions will determine our actions, what we say, how we act, more importantly, how we treat each other. And I heard it said long ago that the quality of a person isn't determined by the things they do, but by how they treat other people. And I think it's important that we all treat each other with respect, especially when we disagree. We're not always going to agree about everything, right? My wife and I don't agree about everything. My friends and I don't agree about everything. My kids and I don't agree about everything. What would the world be like if we all agreed on absolutely everything? Well, we'd have a bunch of clones running around. What's the point of that, right? It's our differences that make life and the world rich, full of color, right? Without that, everything would be kind of black and white. So make sure that you maintain space for respect in spite of the fact that what somebody else thinks or believes is upsetting to you. Because ultimately, you're the one that's responsible for what your day is like, right? So don't let other people ruin your day, regardless of what they say or done, right? And I know that's a challenging concept, and it's hard, and I talk about it with people all day long in my office. It is a key component to happiness, is the practice of contentment, right? Because you can't chase happiness, you can never catch it. Happiness is something that'll find you if you practice contentment. And we can only find contentment if we're in the present. So take a breath, be in the present, live each moment, make each moment the best moment that can be, and then make the next moment the next best moment. And then keep putting one foot in front of the other. Tomorrow will come when it comes. Yesterday is gone. All we can do is be the best human beings we can be each moment of every day. And I really think that if we all take a moment and slow down and breathe and find our centered place and learn that if we're not respecting others, we're not really actually proving we respect ourselves. We're actually projecting the fact that we don't actually respect ourselves, that we're projecting that onto other people. So respect yourselves enough to respect other people and be kind. Golden rule, love others as you would have them love you. And just make it a better day. If everybody makes it a better day individually, the whole world can change. All right, thanks for tuning in. Love to see your comments and thoughts below, especially if you have any questions, anything I can answer about this topic, or if there are other topics you'd like to see me address. I'm happy to do so. And I'll look forward to seeing you next one. Be well.